They say love is trust, but I think modern love is the ability to access each other's iCloud undetected. I played the role of the understanding partner when my fiancé left to be the best man for his college ex, convinced it was noble. 7 days later, he returned wearing a victor smile, oblivious that I had spent every single hour turning his life to ash. The key in his hand was about to become the most useless object on earth. My name is Beatrice, though the corporate directories in downtown Seattle list me as Beatrice Hayes, Senior Internal Auditor. I am 32 years old, and I have built my entire existence on a foundation of unyielding logic and discipline. In my profession, numbers do not lie. Discrepancies always have a root cause, and emotions are just variables that usually lead to bad investments. For the past 4 years, I thought Dominic was a sound investment, a stable asset in my otherwise high-pressure life. I was wrong. The red flags did not wave all at once. They arrived in a neatly pressed envelope inviting Dominic to be the best man at the wedding of Serena, his college ex-girlfriend, and Elias, a real estate mogul with a net worth that likely required scientific notation to calculate. I was invited as the plus one. I had bought a dress. I had booked time off work. Then, exactly 3 days before the ceremony, the other shoe dropped. Dominic stood in our living room, looking everywhere but at my face. Look, we need to talk about the weekend, he started, wringing his hands in a way that usually signaled he had overdrawn our joint account again. Serena called. She is feeling a bit uncomfortable about having you there. I stared at him, my coffee cup pausing halfway to my mouth. Uncomfortable, Dominic. We have been together for 4 years. I have met her twice. Why would she be uncomfortable? It is just... She is under a lot of pressure. He said, his voice taking on that defensive whine I loathed. She wants the wedding to be private, intimate. She feels that having ex's partners there might distract from the vibe. You understand, right? She is really stressed out. I understood perfectly. I understood that I was being humiliated, but because I was trained to de-escalate conflict, I nodded stiffly. Fine. If she needs a safe space to marry another man, I will stay here, I said, my voice dripping with an iciness he failed to notice. Watching him pack was an exercise in masochism. He folded a brand-new tuxedo into his suitcase, the fabric shimmering under the bedroom lights. It was custom Italian wool, clearly not something he could afford on his salary. Elias bought it for all the groomsmen, he explained quickly when he saw me looking. And I got them a little something too. He shoved a small, heavily taped box deep into his carry-on. The moment of departure was the final insult. We stood in the foyer of the penthouse, I must note, that was leased solely in my name because Dominic's credit score was a tragedy in 3 acts. He leaned in and kissed my forehead, his lips cold and perfunctory. I will call you when I land, he mumbled, his eyes fixed on the elevator button. I really wish you could come. He was lying. The elevator doors slid shut, severing him from me, leaving me alone in the silence of an empty apartment. For the first few hours, I felt a sting of rejection, but by 9 in the evening, with a glass of Pinot Noir in hand, curiosity got the better of me. Dominic had said it was a private, intimate affair. I opened Instagram and typed in the hashtag printed on the original invitation I had been forced to discard, Eli Serena Forever. Private. It was a circus. The photos flooding the feed showed a sprawling vineyard estate that likely cost $50,000 just to rent for the weekend. There were fire breathers, a 10-piece orchestra, and hundreds of guests. But it was the photos from the rehearsal dinner that made my blood run cold. A bridesmaid had posted a carousel of candid shots. In the third photo, deep in the background, I saw them. Dominic and Serena were standing by the bar. He was not standing beside her like a supportive friend. He was leaning in, his face inches from her neck. His hand was not hovering politely, It was resting firmly, possessively, on the small of her back. Serena was laughing, her head tilted back, her hand resting on his chest. The air left my lungs. That was not the body language of an ex-boyfriend supporting a bride. That was the body language of a man who thought he still owned her. I put the wine glass down on the marble counter with a sharp click. The tears that had been threatening to spill suddenly evaporated. Sadness is a useless emotion. It solves nothing. But anger is fuel. I walked over to the drawer where we kept the spare electronics. I did not need to cry. I needed to do what I did best. It was time to audit the man who was currently sleeping in a hotel room I was not allowed to visit. The junk drawer in our kitchen is a graveyard of forgotten charging cables, takeout menus, and one specific item that Dominic had likely forgotten existed: an old iPad with a cracked screen. He used to use it exclusively to track his fantasy baseball stats while cooking, meaning it was almost certainly still logged into his personal Gmail account. I retrieved the device, wiped a layer of dust from the screen, and plugged it in. The battery icon turned red, then green. I felt a surge of cold adrenaline. I did not need a password. Dominic was a creature of habit who used the same 4 digits for everything his birth year. The device unlocked, and there it was, the Gmail icon staring back at me like an open door to a crime scene. I sat at the kitchen island and opened the app. I did not scroll aimlessly. I searched for keywords receipt, confirmation, order, booking. The results populated the screen, and my breath hitched. It was a ledger of betrayal. There were invoices from 5-star hotels in Napa Valley and receipts from high-end jewelry boutiques. Every single one listed Serena as the recipient, but the billing information displayed the last 4 digits of a Visa card I knew intimately. It was Dominic's card. I can't believe this, I whispered to the empty room, my hand trembling slightly as I opened a credit card statement attached to an email from last month. The balance was maxed out at $30,000. This was the same man who had sat across from me at this very table 2 weeks ago, head in his hands, telling me that his startup was facing a cash flow crisis and asking if I could cover the full rent for a few months. He was not poor, he was just spending his liquidity on another woman, but the money was just at the surface. I needed to know the depth of the rot. I found a thread between them with the subject line, Plan E. I clicked it. The tone was not that of 2 college friends reconnecting. It was the frantic, conspiratorial whispering of accomplices. He is pushing the prenup again. Serena had written 3 days ago. It is ironclad. Dom, if we divorce, I get nothing. Absolutely nothing. I don't think I can go through with this if I am just going to be a trophy wife on a budget. Dominic's reply sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Sign it. It doesn't matter. He had written back. The prenup has a clause for biological heirs. The baby is the insurance policy. Elias will never suspect a thing if we stick to the script this weekend. Just play the blushing bride. I dropped the iPad onto the counter. The baby. Serena was pregnant, and judging by the context, the timeline, and the desperation in their digital voices, there was a very high probability that Elias Vance was about to unknowingly raise another man's child. They were not just having an affair, they were engineering a long-con paternity fraud to bypass a prenuptial agreement. I opened a new tab and typed Elias Vance into the search bar. The results showed a man with a kind face and sharp eyes, the CEO of Vance Holdings. Articles described him as a brilliant strategist in commercial real estate, but noted his tendency to be intensely private and trusting with his inner circle. He was the perfect mark for a predator disguised as a friend. My fingers flew across the screen, going back to Dominic's inbox. I needed one more confirmation. I searched for United Airlines. There it was, the itinerary for his current trip. Dominic had told me he was flying out on Friday morning to help with the last-minute setup. The confirmation email told a different story. He had booked 2 tickets, one for him, one for Serena departing last Tuesday. He had been gone for 2 days before he even pretended to say goodbye to me in our hallway. You aren't just a cheater, Dominic, I said aloud, my voice steady and devoid of warmth. You are a thief. I looked at the time. It was midnight in Seattle, which meant it was 3 in the morning where they were. The audit was complete. The evidence was irrefutable. Now, I had to decide how to present my findings. I placed the iPad flat on the counter and picked up my phone. My hands were no longer shaking. Tremors are a sign of shock, and I had moved past shock into a state of cold, clinical focus. I dialed the 24-hour customer service line for our bank, engaging the speakerphone so I could type simultaneously. When the representative answered, I pitched my voice a half octave higher, adopting the clipped, efficient tone of an executive assistant. Good evening. I am calling on behalf of Mr. Dominic Russo. He is currently traveling internationally and cannot access his secure token, but he is concerned about a specific transaction from last week. He asked me to verify the recipient details. I recited his social security number, his mother's maiden name, and the answer to his security question. What was the name of your first pet without blinking? Dominic was predictable. He never changed his passwords, and he never believed I would check. Thank you for verifying, the representative said, her voice sounding tinny through the speaker. Which transaction are you referring to? The withdrawal of $50,000 from the joint savings account on Tuesday, I said. Dominic had told me that money was for a bridge loan to a crypto platform, a sure thing, that would double our down payment money in a month. I had been skeptical, but I had signed the authorization because I trusted him. I see it here, the representative replied. That was a wire transfer. The funds were sent to an account labeled Serena Bridal Fund. I closed my eyes for a brief second. Thank you, I said, my voice dangerously steady. That aligns with our records. He had stolen the down payment for our future house to pay for her wedding dress and a honeymoon I wasn't invited to. I hung up and turned back to the iPad. If the financial trail was this sloppy, the digital trail would be worse. I navigated to the cloud storage app. Dominic had hidden a folder by simply nesting it inside a directory labeled Old Tax Returns. It was lazy. It was insulting. I opened the folder. It was full of photos, but one image made the air leave the room. It was a sonogram. The date was from 2 weeks ago. In the top corner, typed clearly in the medical metadata, were the patient details. Mother Serena V., Father Dominic Russo. Gestational age, 12 weeks. I stared at the black and white image of the fetus. The pieces of the puzzle slammed together with sickening clarity. This was not just an affair. This was a heist. Dominic and Serena were not running away together. They were planting a cuckoo in the nest. They intended for Elias Vance to marry Serena, sign the birth certificate, and legally become the father of Dominic's child. Elias would be on the hook for 18 years of child support at a billionaire's rate, while Dominic remained in the shadows, enjoying the spoils. And me, I was the safety net. I was the fool paying the rent on the penthouse and keeping the fridge stocked while Dominic gambled with human lives. I was the financial backup plan in case the con on Elias failed. A wave of nausea rolled over me, but I swallowed it down. I walked to the window and looked out at the Seattle skyline. Tears were for victims. I was not a victim. I was an auditor, and I had just discovered a massive discrepancy in the books. You want to play games? Dominic, I whispered to the reflection in the glass. Let's play. I did not scream. I did not throw the iPad against the wall. Instead, I sat down at my ergonomic desk and opened my laptop. I sent a text to my friend Sarah, a senior technician at a private genetics lab. Sarah, hypothetically, if I needed to preserve DNA from a hairbrush for a paternity test, how should I store it? Her reply came 3 minutes later. Ziploc bag. Freezer. Don't touch the bristles. B. Is everything okay? Everything is clear. I typed back. I opened Adobe Acrobat and began a new file. I titled it Project Uninvited: A Comprehensive Audit of Fraud. I started dragging and dropping screenshots, the bank transfer, the hotel receipts, the sonogram, the emails about the prenup. It was a masterclass in forensic accounting. By the time the sun began to crest over the Space Needle, I had compiled a 40-page PDF that could send 2 people to prison and save a billionaire half his fortune. I saved the file and leaned back. The sad, confused fiancé was dead. The head of internal audit was now in charge. Finding the direct contact information for a CEO of Elias Vance's stature required more than a simple Google search, but I navigated corporate directories for a living. I bypassed his public relations team and his executive assistants, locating a private email address he used for high-level acquisitions. I composed a message with the calculated precision of a sniper. The subject line was not emotional, it was corporate. Subject Merger Risk Audit Project Serena. I attached a single screenshot the text exchange regarding the prenup and the pregnancy and hit send. My heart hammered against my ribs, not from fear, but from the thrill of the strike. 4 minutes later, my phone buzzed. "Who is this? If this is a joke, my lawyers will destroy you. If it is real, or prove it." I sent a Zoom link. The face that appeared on my laptop screen was handsome but ravaged by exhaustion. It was 3 a.m. where he was. Elias Vance sat in a dim hotel room, wearing a silk robe that looked disheveled. His eyes were red, but the fury burning behind them was terrifyingly alert. "You have 60 seconds, Elias said, his voice a low growl. "Tell me why I shouldn't trace this IP address and have you arrested for extortion." "I am Beatrice Hayes," I said, keeping my voice level. "I am Dominic's fiancé. The one who was uninvited so your bride could feel comfortable." Elias flinched. He leaned closer to the camera, squinting. "Dominic's B. He told me you were... well, he said you were having a mental breakdown. He said you were jealous and unstable." "Of course he did," I replied, opening the screen share function. A crazy woman makes a convenient scapegoat, but crazy people don't have spreadsheets like this. I walked him through the evidence. I showed him the timestamps of the emails, the dates on the sonogram, and the flow of money. I highlighted the $50,000 Dominic had stolen from me to fund Serena's lifestyle. "They aren't just sleeping together. Elias," I said softly, "they are building a nest egg using my savings and your inheritance. Dominic isn't just your best man. He is the biological father of the child you are about to sign a contract to support." Elias went silent. He looked away from the camera, his hand covering his mouth. When he looked back, he looked broken. "I suspected," he whispered, his voice cracking. "God, I suspected something was off. Serena was always so demanding, but then she would play the victim. And Dominic, I have known him for 10 years. I asked him straight out if there was anything going on between them. He looked me in the eye and swore on his mother's life that he just wanted us to be happy. He lied. I said, "I am going to kill him," Elias said, standing up. The motion was sudden and violent. "I am going to walk down the hall and throw him off the balcony. I am canceling the wedding right now." "No," I commanded, my voice sharp enough to make him freeze. "Sit down, Elias. If you cancel now, they win." He stared at me, confused. "What, if you cancel now?" "It is just a breakup," I explained, my auditor brain moving faster than his anger. "Serena will sue you for emotional distress. Dominic will claim the money he took from me was a loan. They will spin the narrative. They will say I am a jealous ex who faked the emails, and you are a paranoid billionaire who got cold feet. You need them to commit the crime fully. So, what do you suggest?" Elias asked, sinking back into the chair. "We play a game," I said, leaning in. "Let the wedding happen. Walk down the aisle. Say the vows. Cry the happy tears. But do not sign the legal marriage license. Tell them you forgot it. Tell them the officiant has it. Tell them anything. Just make sure it is legally void." Elias's eyes narrowed, a glimmer of his business acumen returning. "A ceremony without the paperwork. It's theater." "Exactly." I nodded. Let Dominic think he has won. Let him come back to Seattle believing he has successfully cucked his best friend and robbed his fiancé. I need 7 days. When he walks back through my door, I want him arrogant. I want him to feel untouchable. That is when we crush them, not just socially, but legally. We need them to attempt the fraud, to nail them for it. Elias was silent for a long moment, studying my face on the screen. Then, a dark, terrifying smile touched his lips. 7 days, he agreed. I can play the happy groom for 7 days. But B, when the time comes, I finished for him. We don't just uninvite them. We evict them from their own lives. I ended the call. The alliance was formed. Now, all I had to do was play the part of the oblivious, waiting woman, while the man I loved walked down the aisle with the woman who carried his child. I closed my laptop. The show was about to begin. The wedding day arrived, broadcasting live to my living room like a high-definition horror movie. I sat on my sofa, a notepad on my lap, watching the ceremony unfold on the 60-inch screen. The production value was obscene. There were drones, a string quartet playing contemporary pop hits, and enough white roses to bury a small village. When it was time for the toasts, Dominic stood up. He looked handsome, I had to admit. In that tuxedo he had bought with the money meant for our future home. He held his champagne glass high, his eyes glistening with what the audience surely thought was brotherly affection. To Elias and Serena, Dominic said, his voice trembling just enough to sell the performance. They say true love is rare. It is. It is a miracle to witness two souls who are so perfectly destined for each other. Elias, you are my brother. Serena, you are the light that guides him. I zoomed in on the feed. The camera angle was low, likely an artistic choice by the videographer, but it revealed a detail the guests missed. Under the heavy linen tablecloth, Dominic's left hand was not resting on his own knee. It was gripping Serena's hand, his thumb stroking her knuckles in a rhythm that was far too intimate for a best man. Disgusting, I muttered, noting the timestamp of the gesture in my notebook. I did not spend the week wallowing in misery. I spent it erasing Dominic from my life, one cardboard box at a time. I did not burn his clothes or cut the sleeves off his suits. That would have been emotionally satisfying but legally problematic. Instead, I packed his entire existence, his designer shoes, his collection of vintage vinyl records, his expensive coffee brewing equipment into standard moving boxes. I hired a moving company to transport everything to a self-storage facility near the airport. It was the cheapest unit available, located on the 3rd floor of a building with no climate control and a reputation for water leaks. I paid for 1 month in cash and mailed the key to myself. Once the apartment was purged of his physical presence, I secured the perimeter. A locksmith arrived on Tuesday to replace the mechanisms on the front door. I want the smart lock that records every entry attempt, I told him, and I need a camera installed in the main hallway, pointing directly at the living room. By Wednesday, I was sitting in the office of a family law attorney who specialized in financial infidelity. We drafted a civil complaint for the conversion of funds, citing the $50,000 he had siphoned from our joint account. This is a slam dunk, the lawyer told me, tapping her pen on the desk. But are you sure you want to wait to serve him? We could have a process server meet him at the airport? No, I said, a cold smile touching my lips. I want to tell him myself. My phone buzzed constantly with updates from the front lines. Elias was playing his role with terrifying accuracy. He is pitching me right now. Elias texted on Thursday. He waited until I was 2 martinis deep. He wants $500,000 for a tech incubator project. He says he needs the wire transfer immediately after the honeymoon to secure the location. A few hours later, another text arrived. Serena is crying in the hotel room. She says she is terrified for the baby's future. She is pressuring me to call my estate lawyer to update my will. She wants the unborn child named as the primary beneficiary before the baby is even born. I felt a wave of nausea, followed by a surge of dark satisfaction. They were walking blindly into the trap, fueled by their own greed. They thought they had pulled off the perfect crime, and their confidence was making them reckless. The seventh day arrived. The apartment was spotless. It looked exactly as it had before, except for the subtle absence of his clutter. I set the dining table for two. I placed a bottle of his favorite red wine in the center, breathing properly for the first time in a week. Next to the wine, I placed a gift box wrapped in shimmering silver paper. Inside was not a watch or a cufflink, but something far more valuable. My phone pinged. It was Dominic. "Hey, babe, just landed. The traffic is crazy, but I should be there in 40 minutes. I missed you so much. I have a huge surprise for you. Can't wait to be home." I read the message twice. The sweetness of his tone was cloying. He was coming home to a fiancé he thought he could manipulate, to a house he thought he still lived in, to a future he thought he had secured. "I have a surprise for you too, Dominic," I whispered to the empty room. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat down to wait. The stage was set. The actors were in place. It was time for the final act. The sound of the key turning in the lock was familiar, yet tonight it sounded like the click of a trap springing shut. Dominic breezed through the door, bringing with him a gust of stale airplane air and the lingering scent of a cologne that was far too expensive for his budget. I sat on the velvet armchair, a glass of Pinot Noir in my hand, offering him a smile that did not reach my eyes. The apartment was pristine. I had vacuumed the carpets and dusted the shelves, leaving empty rectangular spaces where his vinyl collection and framed photos used to sit. A perceptive man would have noticed immediately that the room felt hollow, stripped of his personality. Dominic, however, was not a perceptive man. He was a narcissist riding the high of a successful con. "Babe, God, I missed you," he exclaimed, dropping his suitcase by the door and coming over to kiss my cheek. His lips felt like ice. The flight was a nightmare, turbulence the whole way over the Rockies, but I am so glad to be back in our sanctuary. He loosened his tie and flopped onto the sofa opposite me, completely missing the fact that his favorite throw blanket was gone. "How was it?" I asked, my voice smooth and even. "Did Serena get her dream wedding?" "Oh, it was incredible," Dominic gushed, leaning back and spreading his arms. "Elias really pulled out all the stops. Fireworks, vintage champagne, the works. And they are so happy. Honestly, seeing them together, it just makes you believe in true love. I felt bad that you weren't there, but Serena was she was really emotional. She kept saying how much she appreciated us giving her space." He reached into his carry-on bag and pulled out a small, crinkled paper bag. "I got you something," he said, tossing it onto the coffee table. I opened it. It was a box of duty-free chocolates, the kind you buy in the checkout line for $12 when you have forgotten to buy a real gift. I looked at the box, thinking about the receipt I had saved on my hard drive, the one for a $5,000 diamond tennis bracelet he had purchased for Serena 3 days ago. "Thank you, Dominic," I said, placing the chocolates next to the wine bottle. "You are always so thoughtful," he beamed, pouring himself a glass of wine from the bottle I had left open. He took a long sip, looking satisfied with his life. "So," I said, crossing my legs, "speaking of finances, I checked the joint account, the $50,000 you moved for that crypto investment. I haven't seen any returns yet. Is everything okay with the platform?" Dominic stiffened slightly, but his recovery was practiced. "Oh, that... yeah, the market is a little volatile right now. You have to be patient. It is a long-term play. I am actually thinking of doubling down once the liquidity improves. Trust me, we are going to be rich." I watched him swirl the red liquid in his glass. The audacity was almost impressive. "I trust you completely." I lied. I leaned forward, resting my chin on my hand. By the way, there was one thing I was curious about regarding the wedding weekend. What is that, he asked, taking another sip. Did you enjoy seeing your son Dominic choked? The wine went down the wrong pipe, and he sputtered, coughing violently as red droplets sprayed onto his white shirt. He set the glass down with a clatter, his face turning a sickly shade of gray. What he wheezed, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. What? What are you talking about? I did not answer. Instead, I picked up my phone and tapped the screen. The 60-inch television mounted on the wall behind me flickered to life. It was a video file Elias had sent me 12 hours ago. The footage was grainy, taken from a hidden camera in a hotel suite, but the audio was crystal clear. Dominic and Serena were standing by a window, their faces twisted in anger. You have to get him to sign the new will. Serena Dominic's voice on the recording was sharp and desperate. If Elias finds out the kid is mine before the money is secured, we are dead. I can't keep stalling Beatrice forever about the money I took. I am trying. Dom's Serena shrieked back. Stop pressuring me. Just play the supportive best man and shut up. I paused the video right on Dominic's terrified face. The silence in the living room was deafening. Dominic stared at the screen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled from water. Baby. Listen to me, he stammered, standing up, his hands shaking. That is fake. It is a deep fake. You know how good AI is these days. Someone is trying to frame me. You can't possibly believe this. I reached under the coffee table and pulled out a heavy manila envelope. I tossed it onto the glass surface. It landed with a heavy thud that sounded like a gavel striking a block. It is a 40-page audit of your life. Dominic, I said, my voice dropping to a temperature that could freeze hell over. Bank transfers, hotel receipts, the sonogram, and the DNA confirmation plan. Elias has known everything for 4 days. He didn't sign the marriage license. The wedding was a sham. Dominic looked from the dossier to me, the color draining completely from his face as the reality of his situation crashed down on him. The play is over. Dominic, I said, standing up to look down at him. And you didn't even make it to the curtain call. The shock on Dominic's face curdled rapidly into ugly, desperate aggression. He took a step toward me, his hands balling into fists, abandoning the sweet fiancé persona he had worn just moments ago. You think you are so smart, don't you? He sneered, his voice rising to a shout. But you are forgetting one thing. Beatrice. I live here. My name is on the lease. You can't just kick me out because you are having a jealous tantrum. If you want me gone, you will have to evict me, and that takes months. I am not going anywhere. I took a slow sip of wine, enjoying the vintage. Actually, Dominic, you are incorrect, I replied calmly. When the lease came up for renewal 2 months ago, the landlord required a credit check. Yours was below 600, remember. You asked me to handle the paperwork to avoid embarrassment. I renewed the lease in my name only. You are listed merely as an authorized occupant, a status I revoked via email at 9 this morning. Dominic froze, his mouth hanging open. And as for your leverage with Elias, I continued, placing my glass down, you have none. Elias did not sign the marriage license. Dominic. The ceremony was a performance. It was a very expensive piece of theater designed solely to trap you. No, he whispered, shaking his head. That is impossible. I saw them exchange rings. Rings are jewelry, not legal binding contracts. I said, Serena is not Mrs. Vance. In fact, right now, she is likely answering questions from the local authorities. The Vance family security team escorted her off the property immediately after the reception ended. She is facing charges for attempted paternity fraud. She has no prenup, no husband, and, thanks to you, no dignity left. Dominic fumbled for his phone in his pocket. His hands were shaking so badly he nearly dropped it. As the screen lit up, I watched his eyes widen in horror. Why? Why is my Slack account deactivated? He muttered, scrolling frantically. Because Elias is a majority shareholder in the firm where you work, I explained. Or where you used to work. You were terminated for cause effective yesterday. Something about a conflict of interest and gross moral turpitude. He tapped on a text message thread, likely from Serena. His face went pale as he read the stream of abuse she must have been hurling at him. This can't be happening, he stammered. It gets worse, I added, delivering the final blow with the precision of a surgeon. I didn't just audit our accounts. Dominic, I looked into your previous employment. That $50,000 you stole from me wasn't your first theft. Was it? I found the discrepancies in the ledger from your last startup. I forwarded those findings to the district attorney this afternoon. They are very interested in how you managed to hide $60,000 in bogus vendor payments. The fight went out of him instantly. His knees buckled, and he sank to the floor, looking up at me with tear-filled eyes. He reached out, trying to grab the hem of my pants, but I stepped back. "B, please, listen to me," he begged, his voice cracking. "I did it for us, I swear, Serena. She seduced me. She is a witch. B, she manipulated me. I only wanted the money so we could have a better life. I was going to pay you back 10 times over once the inheritance came through. You have to believe me. I love you." I looked down at him, feeling nothing but a profound sense of revulsion. "You didn't do it for us, Dominic. You did it because you are greedy and weak," I said coldly. "And as for the future, my future does not include a fraud, a felon, and a stepchild you are too cowardly to claim." Just then, the doorbell rang. The cheerful chime echoed through the tense silence of the apartment. Dominic flinched violently. Is that the police?" "Not yet," I said. I walked to the door and opened it. A courier in a blue uniform stood there holding a small, padded envelope. "Delivery for Mr. Russo?" he asked. "He is right here," I said, taking the envelope and signing the digital pad. I closed the door and tossed the envelope onto the floor in front of Dominic. It slid across the hardwood and stopped against his knee. "What is this?" he asked, his voice trembling. "It is a key," I stated. "Unit 4B at the U-Store. IT facility near the airport. Every single item you own is in that metal box. You no longer have a right to reside here. Get out of my house immediately, or the next time the doorbell rings. It will be the police." The door clicked shut, severing the connection between my life and the parasite that had been feeding on it for 4 years. I watched the security feed on my phone as Dominic tried to call the elevator. He pressed the button once, twice, then repeatedly with increasing desperation. Nothing happened. I had deactivated his fob via the building management app 30 seconds before he walked out the door. He was forced to take the stairs, lugging his carry-on bag down 20 floors. When he finally exited the lobby, the Seattle skies had opened up. He stood on the sidewalk, drenching his Italian suit, looking up at the penthouse balcony with the expression of a dog that had been kicked for the first time. By the next morning, Dominic was not just homeless. He was a social pariah. Elias's mother, a woman who wielded gossip like a scalpel, had ensured the story of the best man and the con artist bride reached every country club and boardroom in the Pacific Northwest. She framed it artfully, painting Elias as the benevolent victim and Dominic as the Judas. The professional fallout was immediate. My phone buzzed with notifications from LinkedIn as I watched Dominic's connections drop by the dozens. He was blacklisted. In the tight-knit world of Seattle finance, reputation is currency, and Dominic was now bankrupt. No reputable firm would touch a man who had embezzled from his previous employer and attempted to defraud a billionaire. The comedy of errors continued with Serena. Instead of fleeing, she turned on her accomplice. I received an update from my lawyer that Serena had filed an emergency motion for pre-birth child support against Dominic. It was absurd. Two people with no money were now suing each other for funds neither of them possessed. They are like rats in a sinking bucket, my lawyer told me over the phone. They are eating each other alive just to stay afloat. 2 days later, Elias asked to meet me for coffee. We met at a neutral location, a quiet cafe in Capitol Hill. He looked tired but lighter, as if a heavy weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He slid a check across the table. $50,000, Elias said, his voice soft, plus interest. I want to pay you back for what he took. B. Consider it me buying his debt. I will handle collecting it from him in my own way. You shouldn't have to deal with the court dates. I looked at the check. It was more money than I made in 3 months. But I pushed it back across the marble table. No, I said firmly. B. Don't be proud. He stole this from you, Elias urged. You don't need to drag this out. It isn't about pride. Elias, it is about the record, I replied. If you pay me, the debt is settled. The crime becomes a civil dispute that got resolved. I don't want a settlement. I want a verdict. I want a judge to look him in the eye and tell him he is a thief. I want it on his permanent record so he can never do this to another woman again. Elias studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly, pocketing the check. You are terrifying, Beatrice, he said, a small smile playing on his lips. I am glad you are on my side. The pressure on Dominic intensified. During my audit, I had uncovered a list of personal loans he had taken from various hard money lenders, shady characters who didn't care about credit scores, but cared very much about repayment schedules. I may have inadvertently let that list slip into the hands of a few interested parties. Now, Dominic wasn't just hiding from the shame, he was hiding from collectors who knocked on doors at odd hours. On Friday, a process server arrived at my office to hand me a subpoena. I was to be the star witness in Vance Vetch Russo, a civil suit Elias had filed for fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. Holding the paper in my hand, I felt a surge of grim satisfaction. Dominic's collapse was total. He sold his Audi for cash, likely for half its value. He pawned the vintage Rolex he had bragged about for years. With no job, no apartment, and a mounting pile of legal fees, he had no choice left. I drove past his mother's house in the suburbs on Sunday, purely out of curiosity. There, in the driveway, sat his sold-off car's replacement, a rusted sedan from the 90s. The basement lights were on. The man who had mocked me for being too safe and too boring was now a 30-something unemployed fraudster living in his childhood bedroom, hiding from the world he thought he had conquered. 6 months is a long time in the corporate world, but it is barely a heartbeat when you are rebuilding a life. Fortunately, I was doing both. My ability to dismantle Dominic's fraud with such forensic precision had apparently impressed more than just my lawyer. My firm's managing partner called me into his office on a rainy Tuesday morning. Beatrice, anyone who can audit a personal betrayal with that level of detachment belongs in the C-suite, he had said, sliding a contract across his mahogany desk. We are promoting you to Director of Risk Management. You clearly know how to spot a liability before it bankrupts the company. I signed the paperwork with a pen that cost more than Dominic's entire wardrobe. That weekend, I attended a charity gala for ocean conservation. Across the crowded ballroom, I spotted Elias. He looked healthier than he had in years. The stress lines around his eyes smoothed away by freedom. We met by the open bar, two veterans of the same war. You look expensive, B, Elias said, clinking his glass against mine. It suits you. I learned from the best, I replied, taking a sip of champagne. How is the bachelor life quiet? He laughed, a genuine sound. And cheap. You know, I never realized how much money Serena was burning through until I saw the audit you did. You saved me millions. B. Literally. We didn't talk about them often, but the updates were unavoidable. Seattle is a small town when you strip away the rain. Serena had given birth to a baby boy last month. Dominic, desperate to escape the financial noose, had demanded a court-ordered DNA test, praying that perhaps Serena had cheated on him too. The results were conclusive. The child was his, but a father with zero assets is of no use to a woman like Serena. She was now suing him for support he couldn't pay, while living in a studio apartment her parents were reluctantly subsidizing. I left the gala late, feeling a craving for sparkling water. I pulled my car into a 24-hour convenience store on the edge of the city. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sickly pallor over the aisles. I grabbed a bottle of water and walked to the counter. The cashier was slumped over the register, staring blankly at a row of cigarettes. He wore a polyester vest that was 2 sizes too big, and his name tag hung crookedly on his chest. He looked 10 years older than the man I had lived with. His hair was thinning, his skin was gray, and the arrogance that used to define his posture was gone, replaced by the slump of defeat. It was Dominic. He scanned my water bottle without looking up. "That will be $3.50. He droned, his voice flat. I tapped my card on the reader. The machine beeped. "Receipt?" he asked, finally lifting his head. His eyes locked onto mine. The color drained from his face so fast I thought he might faint. He dropped the receipt, his hand trembling as it hovered over the counter. "B," he whispered, the sound raw and choked. "B, is that you? You look incredible." He started to come around the counter, a desperate hope igniting in his eyes. I have been meaning to call you," he stammered, reaching out. "This job. It is just temporary. I am getting back on my feet. B, I miss you so much." I looked at him. I waited for the anger, the pain, the desire to scream, but there was nothing. No spark. No heat. Just a mild observation that his fingernails were dirty. "Receipt, please," I said coolly. Dominic flinched as if I had slapped him. He slowly picked up the slip of paper and handed it to me. "B, please," he begged, his voice cracking. I took the receipt, turned on my heel, and walked out. I didn't stomp. I didn't look back. I simply exited his life as easily as walking through an automatic door. Outside, the rain had stopped. I unlocked my new car, a sleek sedan I had bought as a reward to myself. As I slid into the leather driver's seat, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Dominic was standing by the glass window of the store, pressing his hand against the pane, watching me. He looked like a ghost haunting a graveyard he had dug for himself. I started the engine. The dashboard lit up, displaying a notification from my bank. Another restitution payment from Dominic had cleared a meager $200 garnished from his wages. It would take him decades to pay back the $50,000, but the court order ensured he would be reminded of me every time he received a paycheck. I pulled out of the parking lot, merging onto the highway. The city lights of Seattle glittered ahead of me, promising a future that belonged entirely to me. Being uninvited from that wedding was not an insult. It was the greatest invitation I had ever received, an invitation to a life where I was finally the protagonist. Exactly 365 days after the worst week of my life. Another heavy cream envelope landed on my desk. This time, I did not have to worry about being a +1 or checking if I was welcome. The invitation was addressed solely to me, Beatrice Hayes, listing me as a guest of honor. Elias was getting married again, but this time, the bride was a pediatric surgeon with a laugh that could warm a cold room and a heart that was not made of calculation. The reception was held at a private estate overlooking the Puget Sound. The air smelled of salt water and jasmine. When Elias took the microphone for the toasts, he looked at his new wife with a devotion that made his previous wedding look like a bad dress rehearsal. Then, he turned to the table where I sat. "And to Beatrice," Elias said, his voice thick with emotion as he raised his glass. "People say knights in shining armor save the day. But in my story, it was an internal auditor with a terrifyingly organized PDF file who saved my life. literally and figuratively. You gave me the truth when a lie would have been easier. Thank you. The applause was warm and genuine, but the joy of the evening was sweetened by the news that had hit the local papers that very morning. Dominic was not just broke, he was incarcerated. Desperation is a dangerous drug, and Dominic had overdosed on it. After the child support lawsuits with Serena hit a wall because neither of them had any money, he had tried to blackmail Serena with intimate photos from their affair. When that failed to produce cash, he had gotten involved as a mule for a low-level money laundering ring to try and recoup his losses. He was not built for crime. He was caught within 2 weeks. My phone vibrated in my clutch. I glanced at the screen. Unknown caller. State penitentiary. I excused myself and stepped out onto the balcony. The wind was cool against my skin. I pressed the green button. B. Dominic's voice was thin, broken by static and fear. B, is that you? Please don't hang up. I have used my one call to reach you, my lawyer says. He says if you write a character reference, if you tell them I am a good guy who just made a mistake, it could reduce my sentence. Please, B, do it for what we had. I am scared. I listened to his breathing, ragged and pathetic. I remembered the man who had left me alone in our apartment to go play house with another woman. I remembered the man who stole my savings and called it an investment. I waited for a pang of sympathy, but my heart remained as calm as the water below. I am sorry. Dominic, I said, my voice gentle but final. But this number doesn't accept calls from the past. I pressed the red button before he could speak another word. I stood there for a moment, looking out at the glittering skyline of Seattle. For a long time, I thought revenge was about inflicting pain, about making sure the other person hurt as much as you did. But standing there, wrapped in silk and freedom, I realized I was wrong. True revenge is not about burning them. It is about refusing to let them burn you anymore. It is the absolute refusal to grant them access to your peace. I opened my contact list and scrolled down to the name that had once defined my world. I did not hesitate. I tapped delete. The 4 years of wasted youth vanished with a single digital command. I turned back toward the party, where music and laughter spilled out through the open doors. I grabbed a fresh glass of champagne from a passing waiter and raised it to the moon. To being uninvited, I whispered, smiling. It was, without a doubt, the greatest invitation I had ever received. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Please comment below and let me know where you are listening from. I would love to connect and hear your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and please hit the hype button to help this story reach even more people.